the American Western as a genre, and I think I've talked about this on here before, but there are those who would declare it kind of a dead genre. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. It certainly is not at the prominence that it once was. I mean, at one time, the Western was the most surefire way to ensure box office success. And all you have to do is look at the lineup of any classic TV channel to see just how many Westerns dominated the airwaves back in the day. So yes, nowadays it has kind of fallen out of favor and is looked at more as a charming nod to the past than anything else. But I don't think it's a dead genre. If anything, I feel that the last few years have proven that when you take a new look at it, when you get some young directors with some fresh ideas, you can really create something fun and energetic with the Western formula. We see that with The Magnificent Seven, The Harder They Fall. I was kind of enjoying that 1883 show for a while, so I think that there is still mileage you can get from the Western. The Western still holds a very special place in our hearts. There's something about the romance of it, you know, the open West, the outlaws, the heroes, you know, that I think still calls to us. So when done right, you can really still create something fun and wonderful with that Western. That is not what this movie is. This movie is not that. I don't know how else to put it except to say that this movie is a slog. I know I haven't used that term in a little while, but I will. This movie is a slog to get through. This is a film, I think, that is trying to harken back to the classic days of the Western, and it's really trying to lean hard into that style, and I can appreciate that. But what we end up with is a slow, perfunctory, ugly-looking film that it's very difficult to tell who's on whose side at any given time. Excuse me. So let's see if we can get through this. So if you haven't heard of this film, the main story is about Christoph Waltz as a bounty hunter who is hired by a rich landowner to travel to Mexico to bring back his wife, whom he says was kidnapped by a colored man who has deserted from the U.S. Army, but in fact, she was not kidnapped by him. She was running away with him because her husband was a terrible human being. So Christoph Waltz and another soldier head over to Mexico. Once in Mexico, they run afoul of Benjamin Bratt, who is playing kind of the Mexican gang lord of the West. You know, he's El Guapo from the Three Amigos, only more intimidating. You know, that's the best way I can put it. El Guapo has made a deal for protection with the woman and the colored soldier. So he's coming after Christoph Waltz. Also involved in this is Willem Dafoe as an ex-con who Christoph Waltz had put away for a long time, who has vowed revenge, who is also in Mexico, who runs afoul of Benjamin Bratt, but then is hired by Benjamin Bratt to go and kill Christoph Waltz, but doesn't do that, and then falls back. But then Benjamin Bratt makes a deal with the woman's husband, and it all ends in a shootout. I swear to God, the plot to the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie was easier to keep straight with all the alliances and betrayals than this movie is. It's all over the place. So yeah, okay, let's not go right into negative. Let's start with the positives. And the positives are that when you have a cast that includes Christoph Waltz, Willem Dafoe, and Benjamin Bratt, it's really, really hard to have uninteresting characters or bad acting. They are the three pillars of this movie. A lot of people do a good job in this movie in terms of the acting, but it is these three guys who really hold up. They are the tent poles of this film. And as negatively as I look upon this film as a whole, I won't lie and say that I was never captivated by it. There are scenes that one or more of these guys has, and you are just completely spellbound by, that was a weird, spellbound, early in the morning for me, sorry. Spellbound by them. I did it again. Spellbound by them and their performances. There. And especially when they have any scenes together, they are just magnificent. There's a phenomenal scene with Benjamin Bratt and Willem Dafoe playing cards and just bouncing off each other, and it is really, really well done. And I personally think that is all the actors, because the writing is, I'm not going to say substandard, but the writing is not as strong. Boy, I'm really having a hard time hitting my hard R's this morning. The writing is not as strong as one would hope. I think what you're seeing up on screen are very talented actors being able to mine nuggets of gold out of an entire rock face just of pure stone. So, I mean, you can't fault the actors. The actors do a magnificent job in this, working, I think, again, with very little. I think the guy who deserves kind of the most credit, kind of the unsung hero of this, is the actor Luis Chavez, who plays Benjamin Bratt's kind of major domo. He's a lawyer who always kind of rides out and delivers terms and all of this. He does a really good job with this character. This is a character that is kind of a twist on the Western wormy guy. We all know who that is if you've seen enough Westerns. But he carries himself with a lot of pride and power. One, knowing that he's smarter than everybody else, intellectually speaking, and two, knowing that he has the backing of a very powerful man. So even though he himself is clearly not a match for any of the gunslingers that he's going up against, you can tell he's not afraid, and it's just a really subtle and understated performance. So I think he kind of is the unsung MVP of this movie. But I also have to say, going the other way, the weakest link by a long shot is Rachel Brosnahan as the missing wife. Okay, look, I understand that she is probably brilliant in that Magnificent Mrs. Maisie or whatever the hell, that show that everybody loves and that people don't shut up about. I'm sure she's great in that. She is not in this. I am hard-pressed to remember the last time I saw a performance this robotic and stilted. And I think she was trying to go for a, stoic, stiff upper lip woman, tough as nails, trying to survive in a man's world kind of thing. But she was not pulling it off. It was, again, every line was very, robotic and stilted. Every time she was on screen, it just sucked the energy out of the room. So, sorry, I'm sure she's brilliant in other things, but this was not the part for her. It just didn't work. And that's kind of the thing. There's a lot of things about this movie that I understand why they were done from a creative level, but they did not work. First of all, I have never seen a movie with three, I would say, grade A talents in it that looked this cheap and dull. The whole film has this kind of sepia tone over it, this kind of flat color palette that makes it look incredibly cheap. I have a feeling what they were trying to go for was, I think, one, they were trying to hide how cheap the film is. So therefore they were figuring, play into it, use that as, hide hide the negative, accent the positive kind of thinking, and I can respect that. And I also think they were trying to give it this almost like a feel of old film stock that you'd see from around that time, but all it does is just make the entire film look very flat, ugly, and cheap. The film also has this annoying habit of, to transition from one scene to another, it fades to black and then back up again. And it does this numerous times throughout the film, and it's very jarring. It's like, why do you keep doing that? Can't you just do a crossfade?
Why, if this scene wasn't ending,
is this so we don't have to see an establishing shot? What is this? Why are we doing this? It's almost like if you watch certain theatrical release films from the 80s, like that He-Man and She-Ra movie, you can see where they go to black and then bring it back up because they're anticipating that this is going to be chopped up into episodes to be aired on TV, and they're leaving space for the commercials. So watching this, I was just like, so are we saving spots for the commercials? What is going on here? And as a result, I mentioned before that whenever these people, the actors are doing a great job getting something out of very little, and part of the other problem is the scenes are so short in some cases and so jarringly cut that you feel like, okay, we're here, and then a split second later we're gone. Other movies do that too, but you don't notice it as much when you're not blacking out and fading back in. But when you do that, it really puts a bookend on the scene and highlights to you how short it is and how little was actually accomplished in it. So, yeah, I don't know why they did that. I don't have a good explanation for that. And yeah, the rest of the film is just very meandering. I mentioned in that little plot synopsis just how, convoluted the story kind of gets with who's on whose side, who betrayed who, why we're going after this guy, why we're not going after this guy anymore. And that's all fine and good. It's not to say that everything has to have a straight line. But the problem is that by the end of it, it's all building to things. Obviously, it's every Western is building to that showdown between the hero and the villain, and it is so anticlimactic. It is so anticlimactic. Both, I will say that the end of Benjamin Bratt as the main antagonist is somewhat satisfying, but the main showdown between Willem Dafoe and Christoph Waltz is so underwhelming. It's just like, oh, that's it. And I understand that is a very difficult thing to do, those final showdowns in Westerns, because they're usually gunfights, they're usually quick draw things. You very rarely see one of these where the good guy and the bad guy get into a prolonged fight scene that's, the whole movie's been building towards. It's usually, thinking back to, the greatest Western of all time, Tombstone, and Doc Holliday and Johnny Ringo's final showdown. I mean, that was very fast, but it felt like it was building and it had a satisfying payoff. This is like, okay, they're facing off and we're done. And it's gone. So yeah, like, you wouldn't mind all these betrayals and all of this if you felt like they were leading somewhere interesting, and none of it does. None of it does. It took me a long time to get through this, mainly because the streaming service I was watching it on kept cutting out, and I had to go back and restart. But it felt longer even when it was progressing. I can't say that there's nothing good in this. The performances are really strong, and they do make you want to see what happens to these characters. But the film itself is just dull to look at. It's questionable why they make some decisions, and some performances are just so out of place amongst the others. It's insane. So in the end, this one did not do it for me. I respect that it was trying to do, I really feel like it was trying to be an homage to classic Westerns, but I think it missed the mark fairly substantially. So, yeah, so that's my opinion on this one. So, not much more to say, so let's wrap this up. So, final grade for Dead for a Dollar. I'm going a C- on this one. I think if you're a Western fan, you may appreciate... Oh, that's the other thing. Oh, I gotta... Hang on. Let me backtrack. So, pretend like you didn't see that. I gotta backtrack. Another thing about this film that really... Oh, the soundtrack. The soundtrack was so irritating. Again, obviously trying to do an homage to classic Westerns like the Clint Eastwood spaghetti Westerns, you know, fistful of dollars for a few dollars more, that kind of thing. So it was really, the music was very, very much trying to invoke feelings of those films, but it was so loud and so bombastic. What it reminded me of was the soundtrack to Batman v Superman, where everything was accompanied by this huge music sting, and you know, in order to say, what you're watching is important, you know, and this is doing the same thing here. You know, everything. This is a Western. Can you see that it's a Western? Look at how it's a Western. You know, to quote Peter Griffin, the music insists upon itself.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
What?
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
Because it has a valid point to make. It's insisting.
So there's another thing. And again, I understand why they did it. They just didn't do it well. So I had to bring that up. Okay. So for real, final grade this time. For real, zeros. Already spoiled it. Cat's out of the bag. C- on this one. I think if you're a fan of Westerns, of old school Westerns, you may be able to find some more to enjoy here. But I think, honestly, you'd be better off just going back and watching some classic Westerns as opposed to watching this. The performances are worth a look, but the movie itself really leaves you dry. So there it is. That is my review for Dead for a Dollar, which is about all this movie is worth. So thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for coming along with me this morning. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.